today I'm going to go over how I created this scene. It's a pretty simple scene, and we can see the main complex element is this displacement that's happening on the mirror. So, and that was the point, was to have a very simple scene and kind of the focal point be this interesting displacement happening on the mirror. So the first step I started with was finding a mirror model. So I found that in Blender, Blender Kit. Blender and Blender Kit are both free. So Blender Kit is an add-on for Blender. You can download it and install it the way you would with any other Blender asset. And you can find a lot of great free assets on Blender Kit. And you'll see that everything is licensed for commercial and non-commercial use. So everything is royalty free and no limitations basically on what you can do with it. It's an amazing resource. So, even if you just download Blender to get access to part of their Blender Kit library, I think that's a good idea. Because a lot of these models and things you could just, download the source files or export them directly out of Blender and then, import them into whatever software you're using. So I think that's a good tip. So let's look for a mirror. I currently have the full plan, so I can download anything. And I think we can see this is the asset that I used. Okay, one thing I forgot to mention is if you're not familiar with Blender, before you export an object that you've downloaded from Blender Kit as an FBX to some other content creation software, is you'll want to apply. Blender works primarily with a lot of modifiers, so you add modifiers to the modifier stack on an object, and you want to apply those before you export them if you want them applied, or you should delete them, or you can just apply them and they won't, or export the object and they won't be applied. So the way you do that is just by finding the object and clicking apply on the modifiers, and we can go through and apply those. So this one uses a system in Blender called geometry nodes. So if we try to apply this, it will disappear because in geometry nodes, the geometry that you're seeing is not actually been created into polygonal geometry yet. So let's go back, and to see what's happening in the geometry node system, we'll go to the geometry nodes tab, click on that, and we can see this network is what's creating this pattern here. So it's a bunch of pieces along a curve. And so for us to get this out of geometry nodes and created into real geometry, we're going to go to add and click on realize instances. That's the node that we'll be using. So we'll go instance on points to realize instances, and then to the output. You see how this changes into a single object from being separate here. So we'll do that, and then click apply, and it should work. So there we go. We have that, and we can now successfully export that with all of the pieces intact and everything. So that's just a little tip that I forgot to mention when I was talking about the exporting. And then I brought it into Cinema4D and added a basic material for the metal part. I just added a little metalness, and that's it, really. That was a very simple material. So we will add our render view, and then we'll dock our render view to the side. You do that with these three lines. You drag it somewhere and you can dock it. So we'll do that, and let's see what we have. So Okay, so you can see the metal material on this, and then we have this wooden plank material. So you can see this is a painted wood material, and so on here, if you look at the shader graph, there's actually a material blender. So there is 2 versions of the exact same material being blended together, but they are offset because initially when I applied the material, there was a pretty nasty seam right here that was distracting. And I mean, you can still kind of see it, but it's much less noticeable. So what I did is I created a vertex map right here. Whoops, I created a vertex map right here on the frame and blended between this base material and another that was offset in its position or its rotation. I can't exactly remember. I offset it though to hide that seam, so that we don't have that kind of breaking the kind of scene as much when we're looking at it. And let's talk about the lighting as well. So I had a reference, the figure for reference, and just a basic wall and floor to reflect light back up in the scene. And then let me see my spotlight as well. So my spotlight has a gobo on it, so it has a texture, and I'll include the link to those as well. But I'll include some links to some free resources as well, so you can find some gobos that will work for your scene. I think a lot of times people use plant life because it kind of, in trees, it looks like how sunlight might come through a window through some vegetation. So I thought, it's popular. It looks pretty natural. And I think it, improves the lighting of the scene dramatically. The only other lighting we have is that we have a redshift sky and sun rig, and then also a HDRI. So we have a few different lights, and pretty simple setup for that. Initially, I had tried to scatter a bunch of Quixel assets, grass and leaves behind the mirror, but I ended up not liking the look of that. So this is kind of what it looks like. It's very different. It's kind of like the mirror is buried in the weeds and grass. So I thought it was too busy and ended up not moving forward with that version of the scene. And it was also hard with the animation of the vegetation to not have interpenetration of the actual mirror itself. So, it's just part of the process of trying things, and then ultimately sometimes you don't end up using them. And I think in terms of composition, having a strong focal point or visual hierarchy that isn't cluttered is often better. So, we can see the difference when we turn it on, just how much more your eye is kind of drawn in and not distracted by what's going on in the rest of the scene. In case you don't know about the matrix scatter object, it's located here in the menu of generators, and so you will pick your matrix or matrix scatter, and this one I just used a matrix and selected my plane, and had a selection on here. Let me get rid of the materials. So on this plane there is a selection, so you can see I selected the area, the polygonal area right around the mirror. So I was trying to avoid those interpenetrations of the grass objects into the mirror. So I selected that, and then had the matrix scattering objects. I dragged that selection into the selection tag of the section of the matrix object, and then selected my custom objects. So we added a redshift object tag and added custom objects to the particles section. So I added all the different Quixel assets that I wanted in this, in this scene. So I added all those into the custom objects list, and then have it scattering them randomly. So it's just randomly selecting them for each point that is being generated, and then bumped up the count pretty high so we could fill in the scene. So that's pretty much, that's how you use that's how you can scatter objects using the matrix object, and it's very fast. So I think that's probably the recommended way to go about that. And you can get visual feedback through the boxes that represent the geometry, and you can use the same effectors that you would typically use with generators as well. So I think I used a random effector for the rotation, and another one for rotation and scale. So this one is just on random. This one is on noise. So this random effector is adding movement. So you can see as we play through the animation, these matrix objects are moving around, like if they were being affected by the breeze or something. Was the idea with that. And that can be applied to any scene. So you can use that same workflow, if you're scattering grass on a landscape and you want to have it wave in the wind. That's an easy way to do it. I mean, it's not you don't have so much control over the motion and everything, but it does look nice for most applications that you would be using it for. And then just again, when you want to import Quixel assets and have them load in correctly with their materials, go to Edit, Preferences, and then we're going to be looking for Renderer, Redshift, and turn off Node Materials for presets. So you turn that off and then import your assets, and then I come back and turn it on because I like the new material system better. Okay, so the final piece kind of this is the main material that is on the mirror. So that's a normal map that is something that I generated in a program called Touch Designer, which is a node-based system for generating all kinds of real-time imagery. I'm not very well versed in Touch Designer. I've just seen some really cool creations with it, so I downloaded the test version of it and have been playing around with it and watching tutorials and things like that. So this is one of the experiments that I created after watching some tutorials about displacement and things like that. So this is an animated texture, so it's a normal map that changes over time as the scene moves forward. So that's kind of the whole point of this animation, is just watching the kind of undulating motion of the mirror and being kind of focused on that. And so let's open up that material. So we have a material blend between the white material and this metallic gold material. So I think that kind of gave some contrast and also matched well with the color scheme of the scene itself. So and the bump map, the animated normal texture is pumped into both the both the bump maps for each material. And so you can see, you know, we have the material path, and then we go to animation, simple mode, and detect frames, and it'll automatically detect, you know, the frames in your animation. So you, I think generally I've always used JPEG sequences because they're the lightest weight, and yeah, putting video files into Cinema4D has never worked for me. So if I output an MP4 file, I will go into After Effects and output a sequence of JPEGs. So you can do that with whatever program you want, but that's kind of my workflow, and then bringing in the JPEG sequence into the animation section for the texture, and that always works well for me. So we have our blend color, which was just a color map that I have of the same normal texture. It was just a color map version that I changed to black and white, and that is determining where the material blending is happening. So and I'll put the displacements and textures and things like that into a texture pack that you can, you know, download off my Gumroad. I think I will have it be a small fee, but I think it'll be worth it to play around with. So you can see this is the blend color. And they're pretty simple, straightforward materials other than that. So this is the light brown kind of metallic material. So it's just a basic material. There's no other things going on other than metalness and a little bit of roughness. And same thing with the other material. It is just a standard material with a little more roughness. Nothing else going on here. So yeah, I mean, it's a pretty simple scene, and that was the idea. So that the focus point would be, you know, this kind of complex motion that's going on, driven by the animated normal map. So I hope that there's some useful things in there for you, and if you're interested in downloading the texture pack that I've created, or finding some other free resources like gobos and things like that, check out the video description, and I'll put those things in there. Yeah, I hope you enjoy this video, and I will look forward to seeing you in the next one.